Hello everyone, today we're going to do a quick review of solving multi-step equations. When you watched the solving equations video, it went over one step, two step, and it went over some multi-step equations. I would just like to review solving equations in general today with a little emphasis on the multi-step equations. Remember, the big idea with equations is that equations are like balance, like this balance machine here. Right? Whatever you do to one side of the equation, you have to do to the other. And our ultimate goal is to get our variable or the letter in the equation by itself. In order to do that, we have to use inverse operations. So if you remember, the opposite or the inverse operation to addition is subtraction. The opposite is also true. The opposite of subtraction is addition. Again, these are inverse operations. The inverse operation to multiplication is division, and the inverse operation to division is multiplication. So when we are solving equations, specifically a multi-step equation, here's kind of the steps that I put together, and it's pretty basic. The first step is you just want to simplify each side of the equation. So that means if there's parentheses in there, use the distributive property to get rid of those parentheses. If there's like terms on each side of on one side of the equal sign, you have to combine those like terms before you start moving things around. After that, it's just like what we've done in class. You're either left with a one or two step equation, and your goal is just to get the variable by itself by using inverse operations. So let's just start kind of simple here with just a one step equation, right? X plus 5 equals 4. So again, remember when I'm doing these problems, I always like to kind of cover up my variable. So I'm going to pretend like this highlighting is my finger, right? We're not going to worry about that. That's what we want to get by itself. So I want to undo this adding 5. So the opposite of adding 5 is subtracting 5. And again, what I do to one side, I have to do to the other side. The nice thing about when I do this, a positive 5 and a negative 5, those cancel out. So I'm just left with the x on the left-hand side is equal to 4 minus 5, which is a negative 1. Awesome. Remember, you can always go and check your answers. I can say, well, if I plug in negative 1 for x, is negative 1 plus 5 4? Yeah, it is. So I know I got the right answer. Here's a two-step equation before we get into some multi-step. Again, when I'm doing these problems, we got to do PEMDAS backwards. So I'm going to cover up what's with my variable first, right? Pretend that's my finger. That yellow is my finger. So I'm going to worry about that later. I have to first undo this adding by 4, right? Because my finger's on the 3x. So the opposite of adding 4 is to go ahead and subtract 4. Again, what I do to one side, I have to do to both. That's why I draw that line down from the equal sign, because it keeps my two sides balanced. When I do that, the 4's go away, because it just ends up being 0. So I'm left with negative 3x is equal to 10 minus 4, which is 6. Now, I have to get x by itself. A lot of times here, or not a lot of times, but sometimes here I see students add 3, and I get why we do that, because we think, well, it's a negative 3, it looks like minus 3. But we got to think about what's happening between the negative 3 and the variable x. Since they are touching, that means multiplication. So we have to undo the multiplication here. The opposite of multiplying by negative 3 is dividing by negative 3. So when I do that, the negative 3's cancel. I get x is equal to 6 divided by negative 3 is a negative 2. Again, you could plug that back in to make sure it works out. If I do that real quick, that's probably good practice. I get negative 3 times x, which is a negative 2, plus 4 is equal to 10. So if I check, negative 3 times negative 2 is 6, plus 4. 6 plus 4 is 10. So I did it correctly. All right, now for some multi-step equation problems. Remember when I said the steps up above, I said simplify each side of the equation first, and then go ahead and solve your equation. So here we see parentheses, so you should be thinking, ding, 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 I gotta use the distributive property to get rid of those parentheses. So remember, we take what's on the outside and multiply by everything on the inside, so you get 5 times 2x, which is 10x, and 5 times 1, which is a positive 5. On the right-hand side of the equation, I still just have 25. There's nothing for me to do on that right-hand side. So now that I've done distributive property, now I just have a two-step equation. So again, oops, one in my highlighter there. So again, I'm going to cover up the 10x with my finger, right? Because I'm going to deal with that later. And I'm going to go ahead and undo this adding 5. So the opposite of adding 5 is subtracting 5. So I'm going to do that on both sides. Those cancel. I'm left with 10x is equal to 20. My last step here again, to get x by itself, I have 10 times x. The opposite of multiplying by x is dividing. I like to show my division like this, just putting the line underneath, like making it a fraction. That means division. Again, those 10s cancel out. So it looks like I get x is equal to 20 divided by 10, which is 2. Again, the process is the exact same as the two-step equations that we've done in class. Now there's just one more step. Here you had to do distributive property first. All right, I think I got 2 more examples here. Here's the next one. So again, I'm going to draw my line down the equal sign. I look at the left-hand side of the equation. I think, is there anything I can simplify? And hopefully you should be thinking yes. You should be thinking, yes, there's some like terms I can combine. Remember, to be like terms, you have to have the same variable raised to the same power. So both of these terms have variables of x. They don't have an exponent, so we know that it's raised to the power of 1. So when I combine my x's, I have a 3x minus a 1x. So that leaves me with 2x. There's nothing to combine that 4 with on this left-hand side of the equation, so I just leave it as plus 4. Right, I can't combine the 4 and the 12 because they're on opposite sides of the equal sign. Right, there's a big wall here. That's why I draw this line. We can't cross that wall and just do whatever we want. So we have 2x plus 4 is equal to 12. Again, once I've combined like terms, I again just have a two-step equation. So again, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to cover up my variable with my finger, right? The 2x, I'm going to deal with that later. So that means I first have to undo this adding 4. The opposite of adding is subtracting, so I have to subtract 4 to both sides. When I do that, I'm left with 2x is equal to 8. Now my last step here, I have 2 times x. The opposite of multiplying is dividing, so I'm going to divide each side by 2. So it looks like I get x is equal to 4, which is what I want, right? I want to get my variable by itself and figure out what it equals. X is 4. Hopefully this is going well for you. I got one last problem. Kind of combines everything that we've talked about so far. So again, if I ever see a problem with parentheses in there, your first thought should be distributive property. If you wanted to, you could pause this video and try it on your own first. But if you just want to watch me do it, that's fine too. So again, parentheses, I'm going to do distributive property. I'm going to get rid of those parentheses. So I get 3 times x, which is 3x. 3 times a negative 4, so that's going to be a negative 12. And then I still have this plus 3x is equal to 12. Right? I haven't done anything with this 3x yet. I don't distribute the 3 to that 3x because that 3x is not in the parentheses. From here, you're thinking, well, can I start solving for x? No, because this left-hand side over here is still not simplified. I have like terms over here, right? I have this 3x and this other positive 3x. So I have to combine those. 3x plus 3x gives me 6x. So minus 12 is equal to 12. Now I'm just left with the two-step equation. So this is where I just solve like we did in class. I cover up my x. I think, well, what's the opposite of subtracting 12? Well, the opposite of subtracting 12 is adding 12 to both sides. Because what I do to one side, I have to do to the other. So those cancel. I'm left with 6x is equal to 12 plus 12 is 24. My last step is to undo that multiplying by 6. So opposite of multiplying by 6 is dividing by 6. So when I do that, I'm left with x is equal to 4. Again, you can plug that in to check your answer. So here is a quick review of solving multi-step equations.